I expected it to be mind games. I expected it to be difficult. I trained on my own for almost a year before I even joined. I wasn't in shape. I got a 23-minute 2 mile down to a 10:14 in a year. Was really, really, really fit. I lost 20 to 22 pounds in basic because of the shit that they were doing. They weren't letting me eat, or I was eating out of the garbage. I was eating out of the dumpster. I volunteered for garbage duty to take the garbage out so I could eat out of the dumpster so I could survive, like a lot of stuff. So basically, just I knew that there was expectation that it was going to be one of the hardest things I've ever done, and their goal is to break you. I had done like EP, personal protection, executive protection, alcohol enforcement, event security, that kind of stuff for 6 years before I joined. Also, being older than most of the people there, it kind of gives you a little perspective, and I understood why they were doing it.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations. Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today, my guest is my friend Tyler, who I met, I think, through a Facebook group, if I remember correctly. You'll have to correct me on that one if I'm wrong. But Tyler is in the world of marketing, and I love supporting other veterans and active duty when it comes to working together and collaborating. And so his marketing agency is Patriots Marketing of America. And I was just so excited to connect with someone who also understands what it's like to be in the military. I think there's such a camaraderie and just a connection that other vets and service members have with each other. And so Tyler's just a genuine person, down to earth. We've had a few really great conversations since we've met, and I'm so excited to hear more about your story today, Tyler. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's been really great getting to know you and watching your podcast, bro.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a journey. I'll say that. One thing I want to ask you before we get into your story is there's a question that I've just kind of recently started asking my guests, but if there was one word or a few words that you could use to describe how you are feeling coming into this recording today, what would you describe that as?
At peace.
Peace. All right. We'll leave it at that. I'm going to pass it off to you to share your story with the listeners.
Okay. Would you prefer it's military, or like kind of like how I started my business, or what did you want?
Let's start with military, and then I'm sure business will kind of morph into there at some point too, because we are going to touch on that at the end.
Well, I come from a long line of military. Both my parents had family on every generation to the Battle of Bennington in 1775. So it's kind of just been an absolute kind of assumption almost at some point that I would at least try to serve, but my mom never really wanted me to be. And then a certain point, 7 years ago, I really decided to do it. I joined the Army Reserve and got told I could have anything I wanted except the thing I wanted, which was being a medic, because they didn't have any job openings. So they were trying to push something on me with a lot of sign-on bonuses, and I was like, make me a medic. And they're like, well, we'll make you a position, but this one over here's got all the shiny bonuses, and this one will be nothing. And I was like, then give me the medic. And they're like, fine. So I went in and went to Fort Sill, had a lot of BS happen there, honestly. And went to Fort Sam Houston, got trained there. Really great guy. I'll shout out at the end that trained me there. One of the best medics I've ever met. Good NCO as well. But yeah, I started working as a medic at a field hospital for a while, and just been doing little things here and there ever since, but mostly just the reserve life and a few unfortunate events in between. Now I'm currently in the PEB process to get out. So
how was your boot camp experience?
Basic was ass. I think everybody has a really bad story from basic. every day was like that, at least for mine. The drill sergeants that I was at, though I won't name them, were under investigation the last two cycles and my cycle and the next cycle for brutality, assaults, battery, a bunch of other stuff,
Wow.
and like not letting people eat, not giving them cold gear, not allowing them access to things that are basic. It just was not really good. So there's instances where I witnessed and or was assaulted, and there was instances that they incentivized violence towards others, including me. On day 3 or 4, they said for me to stand up and everybody to note that it was their intention to make me quit in front of everybody. Anything basically that they would do to help that process wouldn't be punished. So
Wow.
I kind of had it for hell for a while until like early this end of this the beginning of the second week of Blue Phase. Um, and that was when the PG, the like basically student leader basically, was just like lay off, and everybody else kind of was like, okay, whatever. But I didn't have really anybody there that I connected with except for one or two people, and one of them was African and never did anything with it. And the other guy, which I really haven't stayed in contact with, which is kind of sad. And the other guy ended up being in a different platoon there and just was kind of seeing it. And then he and I got really close, and an AIT ended up being a groomsman and now my ex-wife's and my wedding. So just
So
a lot.
what was your expectation? I mean, you obviously said you come from a long line of military. So what was your expectation going into boot camp? Did you expect it to be like that, or were you completely thrown off?
Well, I know I expected it to be mind games, I expected it to be difficult. I trained on my own for almost a year before I even joined. I wasn't in shape. I got a 23-minute 2 mile down to a 10:14 in a year. Was really, really, really fit. I lost 20 to 22 pounds in basic because of the shit that they were doing. They weren't letting me eat, or I was eating out of the garbage. I was eating out of the dumpster. I volunteered for garbage duty to take the garbage out so I could eat out of the dumpster so I could survive. Like a lot of stuff. So basically, just I knew that there was expectation that it was going to be one of the hardest things I've ever done, and their goal is to break you. I had done like EP, personal protection, executive protection, alcohol enforcement, event security, that kind of stuff for 6 years before I joined. Also, being older than most of the people there, it kind of gives you a little perspective, and I understood why they were doing it. But at the same time, the other three platoons that were in training, their six drill sergeants, after like 3 or 4 days, they mostly just wanted respect, and they only
Yeah.
messed with people when they fucked up. Other than that, they just wanted respect, and they were teaching you. I mean, obviously, the first 72 hours sucked,
Yeah.
but ours were just after fear,
Right.
and they could sense that I wasn't. So that was the problem.
So,
Respectful and did everything they told me to instantly,
yeah.
but that never was something that was different between me and other people. But it was that like they wanted fear, and I didn't give them the satisfaction. So
So, how do you think that that experience laid the foundation for the rest of your time served after that experience? Because I mean, it sounds pretty traumatic.
well, when I went and got to AIT, like they threatened and tried to sabotage, and they threatened to recycle me a bunch of times just so they could keep me. And they wrote on my recommendations sheet all zeros across the board to the drill sergeants that were receiving me, except for resilience, and I got a full 4, which I thought was like, okay, at least they gave me that. But I didn't talk about it until 3/4 of the way through the cycle with the drill sergeants, which were amazing. Those drill sergeants were amazing. Being that most everyone in my family was military, I kind of grew up with the expectation of seeing what good NCOs, what good officers looked like. And they never really treated me as like I was when I was talking to them about like what the military was like. They always were telling me what it was like. And so I kind of came in with, hey, there's bad moments and good moments. You take what you
Mhm.
get with a grain of salt. But I ended up trying my very best to not get fucked with. So I tried to be the very best that I could be. Everyone else was going off base on weekends or going anywhere else on base. You know where I was? The battalion lawn training every day. I didn't go anywhere, not a single fucking place the entire time I was there, aside from the shop that was across the street from my barracks and the battalion lawn that was just next to my barracks. And I was one of the only ones allowed to take supplies back to train with. And I ended up having training sessions that ended up having a lot of people showing up to watch or participate with on at least the weekends. But I knew at one point I was the top student out of 636. And near the end, I was about 3 weeks from the end. And I had a test that was a Scantron error. I had a 98 on it, like manually graded, but I had a 22 because it read one line over. And I thought they were joking when they're like, "You got a 22. How the fuck?" And the PA said no, because he's brand new. And he's like, "No, per regulation, it has to be a Scantron reading. So we'll have to have him retest instead. And that'll only count as a 70, even if you pass." So I got 100 on that one and it's counted as a 70. So it knocked me down to like third or fourth. So didn't get undergrad, didn't get any of that stuff. But like the whole point, I guess, of what all that trauma did was it made me really just, in a sense, instead of like showing fear in the way that I thought it was demonstrating fear in a different way.
Yeah.
Where I was doing my best to not be in anyone's radar in a bad way. I was one of the first to get phase 5-2, and I was one of the only ones of the original like of people that got phase 5-2 that didn't at least lose it once, because there was a lot of bad shit that happened
I'm
with all
sure.
the people, and I was basically some of the drill sergeants' favorite. But I ended up telling them up near the end, and they were all livid. They were trying to get me to report them. I never did. I knew there was their last cycle after me. They'd been doing it for 3 years, so I knew
Hmm.
they wouldn't be able to do it to anyone else. And I didn't want the drama, he said, she said, because they were very careful
Yeah.
about who was in the room. When they have a battle buddy with me, they'd be on the very far side of the room, like the very, very far side of the bay,
Yeah.
around a corner practically, and then they'd be with me. So, or out in like a FTX field training exercise, they'd be somewhere else. So it'd just be kind of, it didn't feel worth it to me with all the chaos. I also didn't want to have to be facing them or in a room again or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I dreaded, like, and I'd have nightmares of having to treat them later on, like if I had to.
Yeah.
Like it was just a lot of time after that was just a lot of nightmares and ruminating about it. And it kind of led to a lot of different behaviors and actions that I wasn't thinking about. I ended up having at one point 17 jars of peanut butter in my apartment, because every time I'd go out, I'd have to have a jar of peanut butter. That when I was in the store, I'd have to buy one because I survived on peanut butter packets, butter, ranch packets, any jam packets, anything I could get my hands on, especially from the dumpster, because those always ended up being thrown away. And so it kind of was like a safety thing. If I had peanut butter, I knew I could survive on it. But yeah, I started at 163 and I ended at 144, I think, in basic. When I came back for family leave for Christmas, right before I started AIT, I was sick so bad with like pneumonia, and I think it was, I forget what it was right off the top of my head. Dang memory. But I ended up getting a lot of IVs, like daily IVs for like 6 days, because I had Myers cocktail IVs for hypernutrients and stuff like that.
Wow.
Hypernutrient smoothies the whole time. And I ended up putting on a lot more weight for the next month or two back in AIT. And then I was up to 175 by the time I was done with basic or AIT. So I lost like a lot of weight and then put it all back on, all while maintaining, really like highest run group kind of stuff. But the whole process kind of sucked because the funny, joking person that I started out, wasn't really there anymore. I look back and I'm like, kind of see pictures of myself before and after, and I'm like, gosh, I was a different person. And I mean, post trauma like that, I was just like, everything was, I had very little respect for lack of discipline, lack of conviction, lack of doing things with that same level of intensity that I was doing, because I also knew that Isaac, the instructor there, who I'll shout out again at the end, he uh, he instilled some really good qualities in me, or I should say, I think he would say brought them out. Um, but he instilled a lot of lessons, and one of them I really took to heart was that we fuck up here, we fuck up there, and I mean, one of your best friends is dead because of you. Don't let it be because the reason that you didn't try or train
Yeah.
or be good at your job to make sure. Or if you're selfish, think about it like this: that you're training your CLS, your combat lifesavers. I don't know if they have the same term in the Marines, but and your job is to train them. So when you get whacked, they're the ones treating you. So your ability to make sure that they save your last is on your ability to teach them what you know
Yeah.
or what you know. That plus Army values really kind of is why Patriots Marketing of America kind of on my back of my business card, I have the Army values on the top and bottom as a banner. Like that's important to me and to why I have my company set up the way it is
Yeah.
because without accountability or at the very least saying, hey, I mean, you've seen posts. I think you responded to one of them where I even am like, hey, good or bad, everybody's worked with me. What do you
Yeah.
got for me?
Yeah.
Like how can we improve?
Yeah.
And we've always got to try and be a step ahead of the curve, right? And that's kind of probably part of. I had hypervigilance like crazy after basic that just never went away. Always checking body language, micro expressions, tonality, patterns, looking for patterns, always looking to see break people down to find out what if they were a safe person or if they were randomly going to snap. It just was harsh. So
Yeah. So, the one thing I wanted to point out is that there are people in the world who, I mean, I've talked to a number of people who are like, oh, people go to boot camp and they act like they had all these problems from boot camp, but you didn't actually serve. I mean, there's a demographic of veterans who will say that. They'll be like, oh, if you didn't make it past boot camp, you didn't serve. But I mean, your story brings up a point that probably a lot of other people have gone through. I mean, you said that just that group alone had what, three other groups or probably more, I don't know, before you. And how many of those people ended up traumatized and how many of those people didn't really ever come back from that? Maybe they didn't turn that into like, oh, I'm going to be a better person. Maybe it just completely broke them.
let me
Um,
put it in perspective. Like the partway through our cycle, like 8, 10 weeks into our 10 weeks into our cycle in AIT, me and that friend I told you about that was in a different platoon and I were standing next to each other looking at buses arrive and soldiers being dropped off. And this one bus of 40 got off and they all looked different. They all practically looked like POWs running around like crazy, trying to get everything and forming up and were so crisp and perfect and skeletal
mm,
and dead eyes. And we looked at him from across the way without a word. He and I looked at each other and then walked over. And then they said, hey, are you in SIL Charlie 179? And I said, yeah. How'd you know? I was like, and I said the two names and they're like, yeah. And I was
mm,
like, I spotted you across the fucking yard.
yeah.
And we were right.
But
Like
no
that's
one
that's
else, no one else.
that's sketchy.
Yeah. And I don't think that it necessarily should have been your burden to report. I think that the burden should have fallen on the peers of those instructors personally. I think that if someone sees something, I mean, how many times does the military say, see something, say something, you know?
Mhm.
And I get it, there's layers. People don't want to, get their friend in trouble, or maybe they just think, maybe, I don't know. I don't know why people do the things that they do like that, but that's fucked up and that's not okay. And, if someone, let's say, didn't make it through boot camp and they dropped out early and they went home, there's trauma associated with an experience like that. So, for anyone out there that thinks that you can't get fucked up from boot camp alone, you can absolutely get fucked up from boot camp alone, because there's bad
Everyone.
leaders everywhere.
It
So,
doesn't have to be a bad leaders. It's just that the way that they do it is they have to break you. And also the way that they do it is they have to create a trauma bond between people. So there has to be a trauma. It
mm,
has to be traumatic. It has to be hard. And it's not just about being difficult. It has to be something that will harden you. So to a certain extent, we need that
yeah,
because we want to make sure they break there and make sure it's one of the hardest things they ever go through there. So in the actual shit, they survive fine and don't hide and run
yeah.
away.
That
Um,
seems like SEAL level of training, though. I mean, that
That's
seems like a little more than basic training, if you ask me. But, you know, I was Navy, not Army. So ours is a little different. But I don't know. I think from the outside in and having not experienced it myself, pushing someone, if that's the word that you want to use, to the point where they're having to look through the dumpster for something to eat. I mean, that's not trying to just mentally break someone. There's other ways to mentally break someone and still making sure that their survival needs are met. Now, if someone is going into a war zone, the military has specific trainings for that. I mean, there's SEER training where, yeah, like you go into the with the expectation of, oh, yeah, I'm going to eat an apple and maybe an onion over the next week. And that's what everyone's going to collectively do together. That's not what basic is for. So I understand what you're saying with like the trauma bond and breaking, but I think that for basic training, they probably pushed it way further than
Oh,
they were supposed to.
I definitely have a twisted view on that when it comes to I totally recognize and agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely a twisted viewpoint when it comes to what I've had discussions with other people recently, even as much as yesterday,
Yeah.
about their experience in basic and explaining some of mine, and they were like, "Wow, I feel like mine was like nothing, and like I have nothing to go through. It didn't go we can go any through anything." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Whoa,
Yeah.
that's not what okay."
Yeah. But
No,
at the same point, yeah, I think that basic now, and I can't speak for the other branches. I mean, I hear that the Army has like cell phones at boot camp and they can call home whenever or maybe on the weekend. I don't know. I don't know what all the ins and outs are. Do I think that boot camp could be tougher? Absolutely. Today's boot camp. Absolutely. I don't know. You look at back in the what was the experiment that was done? There was like an experiment, some kind of prison experiment way back in the day where they like gave these wardens, I wish I knew the name of it. I kind of want to Google it. They gave these wardens like free reign to do whatever to prisoners. And it just showed how humans, if you give them too much power, they'll run with the power and they'll the Stanford prison experiment. Have you heard of it before?
I think it was where they took random people and told some people they were going to be prisoners and some people they were going to be wardens, and then they kind of let those people treat them however they wanted, basically. And then you had the people end up acting like they were prisoners and like really bad, that even if they had not, none of them had done anything. And the wardens ended up being really horrific people
Um,
or something. I maybe
So
I'm
yeah,
thinking.
I was trying to find like a summary of it because Wikipedia's thing is way too long. But when I just Googled prison experiment summary, what's highlighted is it says while the prisoners and guards were allowed to interact in any way they wanted, the interactions were hostile or even dehumanizing. The guards began to become aggressive and abusive towards the prisoners while the prisoners became passive and depressed. So I think the point of it is that this is not where I expected things to go, but I think it's relevant to the conversation. So we're going to go here.
Your podcast.
Just, I know. So just to kind of, I'm like scrolling through and trying to figure out what makes the most sense. And I'll post a link in the show notes for anyone that wants to like read the whole experiment. But it looks like the guy that did the experiment wanted to further investigate the impact of situational variables on human behavior. They wanted to know how participants would react when placed in a simulated prison environment. They wondered if physically and psychologically healthy people who knew they were participating in an experiment would change their behavior in a prison-like setting. They set up a mock prison in the basement of Stanford University's psychology building. What was interesting and stood out to me as I was scrolling through here is that the experiment was supposed to last 14 days and they had to stop it after 6 because of what was happening, because the guards were becoming abusive and the prisoners began to show signs of extreme stress and anxiety. It was noted that while the prisoners and guards were allowed to interact in any way they wanted, interactions were hostile and dehumanizing. Guards began to become aggressive and abusive towards prisoners, while the prisoners became passive and depressed. 5 of the prisoners began to experience severe negative emotions, including crying and acute anxiety, and had to be released from the study early. Yeah, I'll post this link in the show notes for anyone that wants to read it more. But when you talk about your boot camp experience, that's what came to mind because it seems like if you give people power and there's no like regulation to that power, then some people will like take it to an extreme. And maybe in their mind, they think that like this is what it's supposed to be. I mean, I imagine if you talk to if you talked to a World War II veteran or even some of the Vietnam veterans and you asked, what was your boot camp experience like? They'd probably tell a similar story to what you had. And to them, that would be their normal too, right? Because I think that's what boot camp used to be back in the day. You didn't have social media. You didn't have people that, were talking regularly about what happened in boot camp. It was just kind of like this secretive mystery. Now there's a whole documentary on YouTube about boot camps across the DoD. So it's not the same as it used to be, but I think there's still a lot of people that carry that same mentality. But you've heard the stories from the old vets about, I mean, when they got rank and like tacked into their chest and like, people got the shit beat out of them in the military. And like, that was just the norm back then. And so I think some of that attitude just perpetuates into people who think like, we can't let the old school military die. And, that's just kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, the term old army came out from their mouths a few times.
Yeah.
I know for your point about like their peers, three of their peers at what different points, funnily enough, all during field training exercises or at night, came up to me, and two of them specifically talked to me and said, "Don't let those two like get you down. Like you're doing great."
Yeah.
So two of them specifically mentioned that. And you know that we were brought into a room, a school room, a big like school room, like a drill bay or something like that, and talked to by three officers that were coming in as investigators during the cycle. And our drill sergeants and leadership left the room. But beforehand, our drill sergeants talked to us and said, no, you're going to go in a room with those people. You're going to sit down. You're going to stare straight. You're not going to say a fucking word.
Mm.
And these people are going to ask you questions about your treatment here. And you're going to, even when they leave, even no matter what you say, they have no power here. Because even if you said everything that ever bad happened or made anything up that was worse, then you're still going to be mine for the next at least 2 weeks, and I will make at least several of you kill yourselves by then.
Really?
Oh, this platoon had the highest, or company has the highest suicide rate and of all basic training units, is what I heard at one of the churches set from some officer that was there on base that wasn't part of. He was sitting next to me, and they asked me which one I was in. I told him, but nobody. They coaxed the other three platoons into talking, even laughing, but ours just sat straight forward and not a fucking muscle moved the entire time. Nobody talked to them at all.
Wow.
Not a fucking word. And I know that talking about that with one of my friends that was there, because I have, as I said, I only have like, of everybody I went to basic with, I probably have the memory of two people. That's how little camaraderie I had.
Yeah.
I remember two people.
Yeah.
But I remember I talked to it with, he was just like, yeah, you guys were just sitting there like fucking, like they even said to relax and you remained seated at like, motionless. But he said it was kind of creepy. But he said he and four or five others had the unfortunate position of having to sleep in our bay for the majority of the cycle because there wasn't enough room in their platoon bay. So they just were there in the mornings and evenings, but they said they saw enough. But we went on family day. Went to a shopette to get some things, and my mom mentioned like some of the stuff, kind of like just offhand to the lady there, like just like some of this awful stuff's been happening, and she's like, have you heard anything about all this kind of stuff? And she's like, yeah, there's a couple of units here that are really, really tough on their people. What unit did you say you guys were with? And then my mom said it, and then she went pale as hell, and she said, I can't talk to you.
Really? So
Because she
it's
previous,
almost like this covert, like no one wanted to say anything.
well, she said her husband was an officer there.
Mm,
So my guess is he's involved in that chain of command or something like that.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
she pale as hell and
Yeah.
said, I can't talk to you. And then she got checked, finished the thing out, and then handed the receipt and said, have a good day. And then she turned her light off and walked away.
Wow.
And it was creepy. My mom was like, what the hell?
Yeah. That's crazy. Because I don't know if this is the right way to word this. I would love to say that this is just a one-off thing and this doesn't happen often, but I couldn't confidently say that. Like I think that even to this day, this probably still happens in other places. It's just people don't talk about it. And a lot of times, as sad as it is to say, like, who's going to believe a lot of these people that are talking about it when they're new to the military? And, you got this guy who served for 15 years compared to this guy that just joined the military. We should believe people. That's where my stance lies. I'm not saying that it's okay, but I think that there's a lot of gaslighting that happens, especially when you're new. And like
Yeah.
when you're new and you already don't know what to expect as it is, and every day is a new day and everything's a little different, and like you just want to make it through. Like you don't want to be that person that pisses someone off and gets kicked out and didn't even graduate, right? So, there's that side to the story too. And I don't know, there's just a different attitude when you're new to the military. Like, you get treated like the new guy. Everyone treats you that way. And so it's really sad. And it's just another one of those culture things. I think that, the military would have to take a really good hard look at how things are operating, not send in like the most high ranking guy, prepare everyone ahead of time and, make sure that everyone looks really good because, the high ranking guy is showing up. I wish there was like some kind of undercover boss for the military where they could go in and like go through what everyone else is going through and no one knows who they are, but that will never happen. At least not in the next decade, probably. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, you'd probably have to have someone that was prior service that was changing services, and then they'd have to say, hey, we'd like you to send us mail correspondence about what your experiences are like this, and you're
yeah,
going to record everything that happened, and we want to know names, dates, times, things that happened that were against these regulations, and we're
yep,
going to, or whatever, before you go. Otherwise, you're going to have people that are volunteering to go to questionable and under investigation
yeah.
places, or you're just going to have someone like they had at one point like CID, which was
Hmm.
kind of funny. A couple of us had pegged this guy already as not military, which is funny because he'd been hanging out with us for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And then they called us like, there's like, you think CID isn't everywhere? Like agent so and so stand up, and they stood up, and I was like, I fucking knew
You're
it.
like, yeah, you know what? The guy we already knew. Yeah. Yeah. It's the
I knew you were.
military's way of investigating things is so like not efficient. Like it's either someone in a chain of command or it's like we're gonna send the most high ranking guy from the Pentagon, but we're gonna give you like 3 days heads up that they're coming and then make sure when we have this like open discussion, ask him whatever question you want. But like it's like you said earlier, there's always that prep ahead of time where your leader is like, hey, this discussion's going to happen, you better not say what you want to say and make me look bad because we can't have that happen. And that's such a common thing, and that's not just isolated to boot camp. That happens, I mean, every time we had someone high ranking come to our base, everyone was like prepped ahead of time. Like if you wanted to ask a question, no, the question needs to go through us first. If you wanted to say anything, you better make sure you ask us first so that you don't ask
Ooh.
a quote unquote stupid question.
Or AARs, like after action report, like they would you'd say, hey, something you wanted to say, but you're allowed to, and it has to be recorded.
Yeah.
And they'll talk and debate it or discuss it or say nah or something like that, and they won't put it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, well, per regulation, you have to write it down.
The,
Per
yeah.
regulation, I said it, you have to write it down.
Yeah.
Or they coach you before you do an after action report.
Yep.
Hey, just chill, cool it, or we get it, or we're gonna fix it. Like I know after the situation I was in that happened, and I sat in the back of the room like just steaming the entire time and feeling like I couldn't say anything. So when I was like I raised my hand to say something, there was like quiet in the whole room because they all knew I was there and part of the situation. It was a mass casualty event where we had blizzard hit us out of nowhere during the Norwegian Ruck Run, which is an 18.6 or 18.9 mile run at night with no lights, with like a 30-pound pack on 4 different types of rough terrain. So it dropped like 50 degrees, freezing rain, snow, hail. We had inches of ice stuck to bodies and stuff like that. People falling off the roads, and people swarming the AO where it was completely open to the air, which is also blowing at like 40 miles an hour, and just stripping too many people to treat, not enough stuff to go around, not enough me to go around. 2 people were very bad. One was very bad, and me and the parent one ambulance that ended up getting there worked on her for quite a while there because she was too bad to even transport until we could stabilize her. But yeah, like that situation during the AAR, like I even called the I called the NCOIC of that, and she was sitting next to in the vehicle, sitting next to our first sergeant, who was a prior combat medic. And she, I think, was a prior combat medic a long time ago, but turned to a nurse. But at any rate, I remember asking her, like, "Hey, what is hey, I've got not asking, excuse me." I ended up talking to her and saying on the phone, "Hey, I have a mass casualty event. I need backup at the AO because I've got like 150 people here, and it's a clusterfuck." And
Wow.
I hear I hear her say, "You don't have a mass casualty event." And then I hear the first sergeant, "Is that Hathaway?" "Yeah, give me the phone." And then he's like, "What do you got, Hathaway?" I was like, this. He's like, "Okay, well, we're like 15 minutes out. You'll have to do what you got until you get there." But like, you
Was this
know,
like a training
it
exercise or was this?
was a freely participated event. Basically, we were there for volunteer real world medical for
Mm,
a event that an ROTC out of Yakima
mm,
training facility was doing
okay.
for the Norwegian Ruck Run, which is a patch, a little thing that you can wear on your ASUs or that type of thing, and a pin that you can wear, I think, on the collar of your actual uniform, but I can't remember if you can or not.
And it
But
just went really bad, essentially.
240, 249 soldiers and civilians and veterans that were participating. And during this ruck run, they were all in shorts and t-shirts during this run. No extra clothes, no area for heating, no tent. The access to the nearby building for the ROTC had that was heated was denied when I requested it during it. And also, like, we're in the middle of fucking nowhere, so there's no real tons of EMTs. Even when I called
Yeah.
911, I was like, "Hey, how many ambulances can you send?" "Well, the town has two, and we can't deploy both, so we'll just send you one." And a police officer showed up too. But I was having a lot of people trying to go warm up in POVs nearby, but I also had to keep running around and checking on several of the bad ones.
Yeah.
And the whole time, people are standing in line because if you don't get it right, then you don't get it. It doesn't count. So they were
Right.
all standing in line waiting for their pin to prove
Mm,
that they did it and to sign off saying that they completed the run.
yeah.
And there was a lot of people that followed out, and it was just at one point we had over 100 people that were just standing around in that area, and they were so out of it. Some of them got even violent with me when they were saying, "Hey, doc's gonna check you out before you're allowed to leave." And then like I was trying to check this one guy out, prior ranger or something like that. He literally just is like, "I said I'm fine," and double hand shoved me, and like all I had there was an ROTC guy. That was just me and that guy and that AO to manage all of it. So like that situation had so much that I wanted to say during the AAR, and I was coached, do not talk about all of it right now because it's going to come up. It's the biggest amount of stuff that was said on any AAR I was ever a part of. It
Yeah.
filled an entire whiteboard that was like 10 feet wide,
Wow.
and everybody was livid. And at one point, like they were like, and like there was two other medics, a third of the way and all at the turnaround point, that were there, and they had a couple situations, but they were all sending people to me in van loads, also not just finishers or people that turned around and walked back saying "fuck
Yeah.
this."
Yeah.
So we
So you
had.
were there assigned to be a medic for
Mhm.
that event. Okay.
So I ended up getting an RCOM for that, Army Commendation Medal. But yeah, just it was one of those just really terrible situations. I'm
Yeah.
glad nobody died. But that kind of stuff, when it comes to the military, they always like to try to cover their ass at the main point of making sure that, again,
Yeah.
like you said, hey, we're going to come in and do an inventory inspection
Yep.
in 3 days.
Yep.
So, hey, all the stuff that you're missing, go basically, hey, E4 Mafia, we're missing this, this, and this. I need it.
Yep. Oh
And
yeah.
it
Yeah.
appears and then it disappears once they don't need it. Go back.
All the time. It's
Yeah.
such a common thing. I mean, I've heard even on carriers, people dump shit over the sides of the boats all the time. If something isn't matching up to something or they don't need it anymore. It's crazy what's presented to the civilian world about the military. This eco-friendly, credible environment with the best leadership, everything's pristine. It's like the experience doesn't match up to that. And it
It's a
doesn't matter what
combination.
branch you're in. What was that?
Sorry.
You're good.
I gotta be careful not to cut you off.
Oh, you're good.
I'm not trying to. Probably just Italian and showing. Um,
You're good.
It's probably, I mean, it's all just a propaganda stunt. I mean, a lot of it is marketing, honestly, because that's kind of what we do, right?
Yeah.
Marketing is just applied psychology. Propaganda and social engineering is marketing or applied psychology without ethics and morals behind it. It's a Machiavellian look at marketing as a whole to the populace, because it's about, hey, we're gonna gaslight you, manipulate you, control you into whatever thing that we want you to see and be aware of without actually realizing it's happening. And we do it without any care about what you are, who you are, because you are cattle to us. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
So how do you take that knowledge and be better with the marketing that you do with your business?
Which knowledge?
Of knowing that the military uses this propaganda to manipulate people. Do you think that that's just a part of the world of marketing and that's just how it is? Or do you think that there is an ethical side to marketing?
There is an ethical side to marketing. There's a difference between white hat and black hat, for example, is what the terms are in the industry. Black hat, like search engine optimization, for example, you can have people in Pakistan in click farms. Basically, it's illegal to hire them, but not illegal for them to do it. It's unethical, but it's not illegal for them to do it. But you can hire them to literally click on your competitors' ads and just completely drain their ad spend. You can hire somebody to throw, well, that was an ad, but you can hire, here's one for SEO. You can hire somebody to literally put, I don't know, 200 child pornography backlinks onto somebody's website and Google flag it and take it down. So like you can do a whole bunch of horrific stuff when it comes to marketing, or you can take advantage of competitors or, disparage those people and just do things unethically. But as I said, there's a difference between marketing and propaganda, social engineering. And I said it's a lack of that ethics and morals. So if you imply that there are going to be people that are good and bad in the world, they're going to take advantage of other people, there's going to be a lot of bad people that are going to make a bad name. And I think that's also for marketing as a whole. It's not a regulated industry. And also, business owners have to be careful about who they choose to do work with, mainly because you're going to have a lot of people that are going to cut corners. And the darker side of the gray area in between black and white is not where I go. There's maybe a couple things that I would suggest people do that is kind of widely accepted, but at the same time is like on the very whitest side of gray area,
Yeah.
but that's pretty much as far as I would go even. The idea to me is that there's a reason why Patriots Marketing of America's motto is we set the standard. And it's not just because we want to set the standard with who we work for, but how we do it. Because there's a ton of other marketing companies that lack either the experience, the capability, or just have really, really bad experiences with hiring and bad quality third party people to do the facilitation or bad training. Most 92, I think the stat still is the same. A year ago, the stat was 92% of marketing companies worldwide made less than $10,000 a month. So if you think the average is $3,000 retainer, you're talking three clients a month,
Yeah.
right? And they could be the same three clients all year round. And I could see 120K gross. So that's pretty good considering most people, hey, I don't have to do any more work.
Right.
It's that first level of comfortable, right? Is
Yeah.
that six-figure level income.
Yeah.
So even on a skill check level, there are not enough good ones by far.
Yeah.
95% of businesses fail within 10 years, 90% fail within five.
Yeah.
So it's just like you have a lot of businesses that are lacking good marketing and coaching and business mentorship and all that stuff. And they have or assets that they can basically get, or they have to try five marketing companies or five software companies or websites, just to make something that works. And there's a lot of scam artists that are trying to pretend to be in the marketing scene that literally are just saying, hey, yeah, I'll do SEO. And they have like $3,000 a month SEO budget and they'll spend $36,000 in a year and they'll put five backlinks up the entire time.
Yeah.
And that was literally an actual example of a person that came to talk to us about 3 months ago about their experience with SEO. And
Yeah.
like it happens all the time. And that's kind of the main reason that I kind of want to keep doing this is to, say, hey, I gave my company to God a long time ago and said, hey, this is yours. I just work here.
Yeah.
What do we want us to do? And the only answer I got was just keep helping people do it for me, because that's kind of what the Bible says about it. Just do
Yeah.
everything as if you're doing it for me. And that kind of means we're going to try and do it the right way as best we can every time.
Yeah.
And somebody has to set a standard. Somebody has to do that. Somebody has to call out people or call out the industry and say, hey, knock it the fuck off.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's not just army wide. So I mean, that's business wide, people wide. People
Absolutely.
are too afraid to talk about other people's or industry or government or anything like that without fear of censure or retaliation.
Yeah.
And that's a big one, especially in the military, is the retaliation
Oh
because
yeah.
so
Yeah, I feel like we could do a whole other episode on the dark side of marketing, apparently. I mean, there's just things that most people just don't know unless you're in the space. Like I am very naive and ignorant to a lot of the like darker things that happen in the world because I just don't know about them. And I don't always care to know about all the bad things that happen because then I would just be in a negative space all the time. But also trusting someone, and this also goes for any industry, trusting someone to take a portion of my life and my livelihood in their hands and trusting that they're going to do the best with it and have the best intentions with it. And people put that trust in the military for 20 plus years. People put that trust in other businesses or third parties, or even like, an example like flying in a plane to another country, putting trust in the hands of the pilot that they did their job and they're showing up competent enough to do their job. I mean, we as humans trust people to do the best they can every single day. And there is just so much shady stuff that goes on that we just don't know about, that other people are afraid to speak up and say something about because there's always layers when you're speaking up about things. I've been talking about military mental health public platform for over 2 years now. And there's still people, I mean, I talked about this with you earlier. There's still people that will hop on some platforms. YouTube's a big one right now, and they'll discount a lot of things that are said. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to stop talking about the things because, people speaking out against it is exactly why I do what I do, because that means that the stigma still exists. But there's always people in every niche. And I'm grateful that there's Patriots Marketing of America that is doing things the right way for sure. So I do want to talk about that a little bit because I know at times flown by. We've already been talking for almost an hour and there's still so much more to talk about. So we'll have to do a part two. But what I think is really cool about the fact that you are doing your own business while you are still in the military is that a lot of veterans, they find purpose is something that's really hard when they separate from the military. Like no more military, no reserves, no active duty, nothing. Like that's just gone. And I find that whether there was camaraderie or no camaraderie, that there's still some kind of purpose attached to the military for a lot of vets. And so it really seems like when you talk about what you do in your business, I can hear the passion come through. And so it's cool that you found what I perceive as your purpose. And I'm curious if you perceive it as that way as well. But I would love to hear more about why you chose that specific avenue for business. Why marketing?
I mean, if I may, I mean, a thought occurred to me while you were talking. If I could say that quick and then we'll go
Go
into
right
that.
ahead.
Like when you were talking about how we kind of you don't want to see the world in that dark way, you
Mhm.
know. I think is what you were saying, kind of
Mhm.
something along the lines. And the thing that kind of popped to my mind was two things. Just like when you're taught to shoot, do you get taught sometimes different ways.
Yeah.
Some people say, let it be a surprise, let it surprise you when you pull the trigger. And like I was always taught with let it be a command detonation. You know
Mm.
exactly when it's going to happen, you know exactly where it's going to go, and you make it go exactly when and where you're putting it. And that's kind of a perspective shift. And the other thing I was going to think of after that was, we live in the created manifestation of the realities we choose to accept,
Mm.
right? So the pre-manufactured reality that other people that aren't in the military that they see, and they don't even see the box. They don't even see that level of power and the power of three. They don't even get to see, hey, there's this is a matrix. I mean, people get a lot of shit, like Andrew Tate, for example. He talks about the matrix a lot. I'm not necessarily a supporter, but every time you listen to him, you either get challenged into your own beliefs and come out the other side better, or you're like, hey, you kind of got a point. But there's a lot of things he says I don't agree with. But at any point, if we're going to choose to live in this world and engage in it, whether we're trying to make it better or just to live through it effectively, I think that we have to be in realism a little bit. Because if you're not going to be in a real state of realism, you're in a state of acceptance. And the state of acceptance is going to be a determination based off of your awareness or your level or willingness to just go with whatever other people say. Now, people like you and me that have seen the other side of the veil a little bit, we understand, and therefore it behooves us, if we're going to be leaders in the scene, to actually call out those people, to
Mm.
actually actively see the shit for what it is, and make sure that others do too. And the only way to do that is, unfortunately, sometimes is to see the darkness and to see the dragon. Because once you've seen the dragon, you can't unsee it.
You're right.
So that's kind of where I go in my head after you said that. I just wanted to
Yeah,
kind of
no, I appreciate that you said that. I think that there is a little bit of fear of the darkness of things, you know. It's like that fear of the unknown, or like, you know, I think in my head grappling with like, what reality do I want to create for myself?
ah,
And then also at the same time, like, is too much darkness or negativity going to pull me down into something that I can't handle? And so anyway, that could be a whole different discussion, but I appreciate that you brought that up because there's some wheel spinning in my own head. But
choose your heart.
yeah,
Because you're going to have it hard either way. You're going to have it hard whether or be afraid, because either you're, but if you're going to have to choose between I'm going to be complacent and not care, and I'm going to just hide because I don't want to face this thing I'm aware of, just because it could be scary, does that mean that we've learned anything from our
yeah,
trauma?
yeah,
Does it mean that we've used the trauma in a positive, or is it this is the trauma using us? Because if we're going to stand there and say, hey, I'm going to call out these other people over here for this stuff, but at the same time, I'm going to kind of stand over here and say, ah, yeah, I didn't see that. And
yeah.
there's a famous scene, I think, in the movie The Town where it's about bank, like they're robbers basically, and they're dressed up in nun outfits and they're changing one vehicle to another. And this cop is staring at them and they all freeze and they got AKs and like nuns with like gold ghoul masks, and they're just staring at each other, and he just says like, nope, I'm not.
Just
And then
walks away. Yeah,
and it's like, I'm just gonna look the other way and you guys just change. I didn't see nothing, don't shoot me. That's kind of what I think about when I think about stuff like that, where it's like, okay, you have the option. Yeah,
yeah,
it could be scary. Yeah, you could end up getting shot, but Tank Man, if you're
yeah,
familiar, you have the choice. And at the end of the day, if your price isn't your life, then you don't have like a verifiable position that is actually held firmly. You know, I
yeah.
don't mean to they come off as like admonishing in any way.
No, no, that's good. It's a good discussion to have. Because yeah, I mean that's an internal discussion I have with myself all the time, is like, how much do I feel like for me is too much? And then also grappling with, I don't know if any of this makes sense, but like grappling with, like, if I'm taking on all the problems of the world, quote unquote, all the problems of the world, is it going to be too much for me to handle? And constantly like, you know, grappling with like, how much do I want to take on? How much do I want to like put on myself? And so it's like this weird balancing scale, I guess, is the best way for me to try to explain it, where like sometimes I have to take a step back from social media because I have to like not try to take on all the problems of the world, but also not trying to feel guilt for seeing something and not like stepping up and saying something too, you know, if that makes any sense at all. But
1000%.
yeah, but it's a good conversation to have because it's like, you know, setting personal boundaries, but then also still living within my values. That's
Mhm.
where I think the flow lies. And so yeah, something I'm going to have to figure out on my own regardless, instead of just avoiding it. So I appreciate that you brought that up, because this podcast isn't just for me to interview you, right? Like there's times that I get challenged on my own podcast and I appreciate that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And then I think that you were curious about why I kind of started doing marketing
Yeah.
or like, what we do.
Yeah.
Um, like it kind of was to me a God thing. I was dealing with the religious exemption for the vaccine when the mandates came out in the military. I was told, hey, well, that's a whole different discussion, but short version of that, I was given even direct orders to take it, and those were illegal, and illegal flags were put on me, and my career was delayed, and a bunch of other stuff like that multiple times. But the day that they came out with that, like, hey, you're gonna get this, or you're gonna get dishonorable discharge. Within the next 2 days, I also was told from the college I was attending, doing the last of the prerequisites for either nursing or PA school, which I had a surefire way into both as a medic. And I was working at a hospital for Sacred Heart in Providence, kind of doing a float medical assistant, anything like that. They were during COVID, so I kind of got thrust into so many different specialties and doing things under providers' licenses because they knew they didn't have to train me for anything. I was operating well below my ability to practice under civilian stuff. So I just ended up being able to do a lot of things I probably shouldn't have as a medical assistant. But they were telling me, hey, you're going to either have to quit or take a test every day with the tester that had that chemical on it that forget the name of it, but it's really toxic, especially if you take it like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, I can't do this. And I was like, if I can't change career fields, this is also right around when like a whole bunch of craziness with I think the that Norwegian Ruck March happened and just so much things. And I was told on the same 3 days, I'm gonna potentially lose my job. I'm gonna get a dishonorable discharge, so I won't really be able to find work very easily. I had suffered a shoulder injury at NTC, National Training Center, in by Fort Irwin, Cali, for my shoulders, and I was pending like shoulder surgery, and so I couldn't do anything physical to like do like construction or anything other type of stuff, or even the security or private protection. I couldn't do that work anymore. And medical was kind of burnt out for me a little bit by then. And so all my experience was in those two or three fields, and I was like, I can't do any of them, and I can't even get a regular job if I get a dishonorable discharge. So what, Lord, am I going to do? You have my attention. And I kind of felt like a giant bang, bang, bang. Okay, I hear you. So what's the plan? So I spent 31 hours online in a row, just looking for what type of things. I knew I had to start a business. I had done one before. My parents had done business before, and I just knew I had to be able to do something that I could control, you know. And I at first looked into this wholesale real estate thing, and then I was looking at a blog about this course about it, and the blog changed halfway through to talk. He's like, well, what I really want to talk to you about is digital real estate. And I was like,
Smart.
digital real estate?
Smart.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, my mentor or one of my mentors there is the main guy there is Joshua T. Osborne. He's got a badass marketing, and he's got Mr. and Mrs. Leads, and he's got digital CEO. He's got a bunch of courses, and some of the people that he partners with have a couple of their courses as well. I ended up going through all of their courses, and I really enjoyed the courses, but I chose them because I was like, this is right up my alley. I've been doing a lot of this stuff for my parents' business, for friends and family's businesses for a long time, and I've always kind of had a memory about that, or not a memory, like a mindset about that really well. And so those kind of things just kind of honed me. And I started December 17th when we purchased the program. And by December 21st in the morning, I finished our building my 13-page website, our social media stuff. And that was including the time in the course that it taught me to build it as I went. Because I took the course while I was building it instead of taking the course and then building it. So I kind of did it step by step as I was doing it. So I kind of did the quote unquote Snowden approach from the movie, where he was like creating it while he first created the thing to record the information for what he did, and then he did it. So it did it in half the time.
Yeah.
Got our first client January 1st, 2022. And then I had surgery January 13th. So I was in a sling, left-handed, click, type, click, type,
Man.
building sites and social media and stuff. And that was 2.5 years ago. And since then, PMOA has grown a lot in our capability, as well as our respect in the industry and in the area that we live in. So it's just been a wild journey. We started with like 6 services and like 4 genres, and now we have 12 or 13 genres and 141 services. So it's just a lot of different things that we have been able to do. Even just recently started doing having the ability to offer financing 3 different ways for projects, because a lot of people doing business, they can't afford it. And they need marketing, but they can't afford it.
And they
But they
go to
also
the
can't get the loan
Fiverr
from the
and
bank.
Upwork.
Well, with Fiverr and Upwork, you're going to get what you pay for when it comes
Hmm.
to that. And you have no idea the value when you're getting it. They're also oftentimes working off of really old data that is not super great. And also, not to say bad things about foreign VAs, I even have some, but the idea is that if you're going to start out, right, that you'd only need something so good. If you're going to start out, you just need something to get you by, but do it with the perspective of knowing, hey, I'm going to take this and I will need to get grade B or grade A shit later,
Right.
because as I grow, I'm going to need to upgrade to what it is. Or if you have starting capital, then you should build it. If you have more money than time, you should invest it in the thing that will actually make you the money now, and then use your time wisely. Or
Right.
if you have way more time, do the cheap thing now and do all the footwork yourself.
Right.
Those are both amazing models, and they work, both of them, very effectively. But you kind of have to have the expectation, understanding of both, especially in the first one I mentioned, because that's a lot of where a lot of people get it wrong. Fiverr and all those types of people, or oh, I hate to say this, I hate Wix with a passion, but a simple free Wix website or GoDaddy site, it's something. It won't rank SEO wise at all, but at the same time, you would have to do a lot of custom coding and additional stuff to it that'll make it rank better, but it's doable, but it's just a lot harder. And you're not obviously going to know how to do that as a new person
Right.
doing this. But if it's just something that based off of how you're planning to do your marketing strategy, as long as you have one. But yeah, long story short, we kind of have had a lot of things happen in what got us into this. But kind of the reason why we end up like really, I think, doing well is the military values and the
Mhm.
values that we try to instill into the work that we do. The way that we portray ourselves to clients, even if we struggle at different points in the projects, or it's a marriage, it has to be. If you're going to have any sort of business relationship, you have to hopefully have the mentality of an actual entrepreneur and realize that it's going to be a back and forth. There's going to be mistakes on every side of it. There's going to be things, and we're all going to get screwed over. That
Yeah.
shouldn't be something we accept, but at the same time, we have to understand that, like, if bad things happen, you have to roll with the punches and either decide, is this based off of their core values, their character ethics, or like that they're a bad person and they're just being shithead and I need to get them away or sue them? Or is this something that was a mistake or something bad that happened, but they're good and they're worth training? And like, I think Steve Jobs' mentality of it versus like my brain's farting Amazon.
Uh, is it Jeff Bezos?
Jeff Bezos.
Hmm.
I think Jeff Bezos said he's like you have a choice. Is like you can either train someone for the intention of them being there for 10 years, or you can train them and have the hi, if you fuck up, you're gone mentality.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like if there's an allowance for grace and opportunity and freedom without micromanagement, then you have the ability to have growth.
Yeah.
Leadership and culture are the biggest things that have an influence whether or not your company succeeds or fails, aside from process. And
Absolutely.
those two things are often ignored or not really done well enough. That's why we have so many coaches for leadership and coaches for business process. And that the one part that they can't really control is time, because it takes time to grow a good culture, but it takes intention to do any of those. And you have to want to do that, because otherwise it's just going to be whatever trauma you have. It's going to be influencing what your decisions are in your business, for your clients. And it's going to show in everything you do, which is why our values are the way they are. Because at the very least, even when we fuck up, we have 5-star reviews for 2.5 years, and we haven't done it all perfect. We have had mistakes. We have had delays. We have had a lot of things. But at the very least, at the moment, we have a 5-star rating for 2.5 years, because we've got at least the relationship built with those
Yeah.
people in the right way and the right ethics. And also, I think that at the end of the day, no matter what happens, what anybody else says, all we can do is try to do our best. And if that wasn't great today, then we're going to try again tomorrow and keep going from there. And that's kind of all we can do.
Where can people find you and how can we best support you?
Well, you can like and follow Patriots Marketing of America on Facebook. We also have email that we can also have you sign up for on our website, which is contact.patriotsmoa.com/PMOA. It's a little bit of a mouthful. It's a temp website up. We're rebuilding very much more massive site right now. I had mentioned to you before the podcast that it was like 5 or 6 times the site. This temp site is actually 4 pages. This one's going to be like 40, so it's probably closer to 10 times the size.
Wow.
Um, but so small project. It's just taking a little bit. It's a little over budget time. But you can also you can also follow me. I'm really easy to find on social media. Facebook, I do a lot of stuff through there. We have a like nurture email and tips and tricks and training and stuff like that. Goes out once a week. I think we have about 150, 200,000 business owners currently on that list, and we can get you on that. That'll be on that site. And maybe Rachel can have the link on there somewhere for the
Yeah.
podcast. But like the biggest thing that we like to do, or I like to do personally, is do basically what I do as a medic for your business, because I diagnose and I rapid fire will say, hey, this is what we got to do. I'm going to tell you bluntly, this is where you are. You're not going to like it. I'm going to tell you, hey, this is ass. Rachel will tell you. I will tell you bluntly, very much so, where you're at, but also kindly, hey, this is where we need to take you. And these are a bunch of things you can go do or things that we should tell you to do. I don't care if you do it for me. We just want to be of help to you, because eventually that'll pay itself forward. Because if you don't need me now, you can recommend me to friends or something like that, or in 2 or 3 years you'll be ready for
Yeah.
some of the things we do. So we just want to help building the community of business, because there's no business without community, and there's no America without patriotism being demonstrated. And those individual actions of all of those character traits and values, those are only going to be continued, perpetuated if we enact them in the things that we do and say.
Yeah.
So I don't really care. And that's what my people hate is I don't really care about as much about making money. I charge somebody 10,500 for something that I should have charged them 22,000 for to make a really good profit off of.
Yeah.
By industry standard, flat, like that's what I should have charged, and I don't really care. I made probably $1,100 on it. I should have made a lot more, and it was
Yeah.
software related, so I should really have done that. I just don't care. I'm like, I really would rather just do good by people and hope they do good by me. And if
Yeah.
I get burned a lot, I get burned a lot by having that kind of heart behind it. A lot of people try to take advantage of my time, but I don't really care. So it's just kind of somebody has to do it. Might as well be me.
Yeah. The relationship part of business, I think, is something that gets lost a lot in corporate worlds. And I think it's so important. And just to plug your business a little bit, because I can, I think that you do an incredible job. And I appreciate the radical honesty. You don't get that a lot when you talk to people about really, I mean, anything these days. There's people that want the business so bad that they'll just tell you what they think you want to hear. And then you give them your money and then down the line, it's like, oh, well, why didn't you tell me this? Or why didn't this get brought up? And either they don't know, or they just ghost, or they just, oh, I didn't think I needed to tell you that. But radical honesty, relationships, I mean, I think you're doing everything right. And, in understanding that as humans, we have things to learn along the way. And so when you ask people for that opinion of like, how are things? Tell me the good and the bad. I think that's so important. And so anyone that's listening to this episode that needs marketing or knows someone that needs marketing, please refer out to Patriots Marketing of America, because they really will do an exceptional job and take care of you. Tyler, I am so appreciative that you came on the show today. Over an hour has flown by, and I feel like there's still so much more to talk about. So again, we'll have to do a part 2, but to wrap up this episode today, are there any last words or piece of advice you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, shout out to my instructor in AIT, a good friend. I believe Sergeant First Class. If no, I think he got E8. You'll have to correct me if you see this, Isaac. Sorry about that memory. But Isaac Crabtree, phenomenal NCO, exceptional instructor, very good medic, and terrific mentor. Appreciate everything that you taught me. But I mean, honestly, got to give it to God. I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing is so many times, every single thing that I've ever been through, I've just been, I tell people some of the things I've been through, and they're just like, how are you even functioning? I don't know. I try my very best, but I have really good days and I have really, really bad days. But it's just a lesson in reliance and trust, and choosing every day where you're going to put your effort. And if you're stressed out, write a list. If you're having anxiety about the list, or excuse me, if you're having write a list if you have anxiety. If you're stressing about your list, cover it all up except for the one top or two things, and then do those. If you'd make a plan and execute it slowly, day by day, and you plan it out, put it on your actual calendar, make appointments, make alarms for it, make a purpose for it. If you're saying you're going to get into shape for a New Year's resolution, make it an actual plan. Plan out your workouts, do everything like that. Spend a week planning out 6 months of workouts, and then show up. Same thing goes for business. If you're gonna do something, fucking do it. Don't just sit there, because guess what? What's gonna happen if you don't? Nothing, except bad shit. So you have to choose and decide to actively pursue the life that you want. Otherwise, you're gonna get the life that you just get. The hand that you're dealt. No, become the dealer. Decide how you're going to make that hand show up. That's all I got for you guys.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today, with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.